Without any further ado, we are very excited that Dale Dougherty from Make Magazine is here today. He's going to be talking about how makerspaces thrive in formal education. I think we all are familiar with Dale's work on in one way or another, or if you're not, you probably are, you just don't know it. Dale, we are so thankful for you being here today. I am thrilled. I feel I'm a little fangirling right now, I'm not gonna lie.
Oh,
So welcome, and I'm gonna stop sharing and hand it over to Dale.
yeah. Well, welcome everybody. I hope you can hear me okay. Sarah, thank you for the kind introduction. And Liz, thank you for inviting me here. Um, I thought I'd will eventually share, but there's Rodney. Hi, Rodney. Hey, thanks for the Fab Foundation. So let me get my talk up there, but or share my slides rather. There we go. And go to slideshow. Hopefully you all can see that. Good. So, you know, practice the innovative arts is kind of the title here, but I'm really kind of going through some of my work and in the past and up to now, and this is a term that I've started using recently, and I'd like to share with you. As always, I'd love to hear feedback from you. My email is there. Uh, um, and I just love to make connections with people that are interested and telling me what they're doing and all that. So, I'm really excited because we just sent off to the printer the 20th anniversary of Make Magazine. So it started in 2005, 20 years ago, and I'm very proud of it. I think for those Fab Lab folks in the audience, the first issue had an interview with Neil Gershenfeld, and this new issue has we had Neil write a new piece for it. Hey, reflect on the last 20 years and talk about what uh, what your thoughts are. And what he said was kind of interesting. He said that he said that he was right at the time thinking about technology. What he didn't see was all the people that came out of Fab Lab and their development. In other words, he was right about technological progress. He didn't quite understand that maybe the most important work was the people. And that's how I feel about the maker movement. And my connections really were somewhat based on technology and tools, but really more about the people. That's what I'll get into. But that just gives you we've done 92 issues of Make and then some special issues. So we've been at it a while. And I'm going to use some of the covers in the presentation. They don't necessarily relate to the topic, but they give you kind of an idea of all the things we've been doing and covering over the years. In this new issue, I wrote about, a magazine, a movement by and for makers. That the first issue, I used the word makers in this space, a welcome. And I decided, if we were going to be Make Magazine, we would call our readers not readers, but makers. And I think it somehow planted a seed. I won't take credit for the movement. I think all of us can take credit for the movement because it's really a cooperative thing. Nobody invents that or creates it. It just happens and you see it looking back. But what I did talk about in the article, that I think some of the key ideas where we are producers, not just consumers, and that we, live in a society that sees us as just consumers. And I particularly thought that we need to that it's part of human nature to make things. It's who we are at our best. Um, that everybody's a maker, but we don't all realize we're capable of doing it. And it's kind of like being an athlete or a musician. If you're not exposed to it and someone doesn't say, "Hey, if you want to try this and do it," you never know what you're capable of doing. So and then, there were increasingly, over the 20 years, new tools for making things. It was getting easier to make things. But I think one of the insights I had is this wasn't all business. This was a lot of play. In other words, people do things, make things because it makes them happy. And they like to share it with other people because that makes them happy. And that sharing, I think, is the core notion that we build a community around. And again, as I've said, you can find really silly stuff. This is the make cover of Make is an animatronic hand by Jesse Velez. That's part of the Wednesday TV show, and we talk about. But that's a maker making these things, and their products are on TV. That's pretty cool. We've come a long way. I'm also really proud of Maker Faire, which we started in 2006. And, here we brought it back more recently in 2023 and last fall at Mare Island, which is an old naval shipyard. And it's really, to me, inspiring to be in a place with like these windows that where they used to make submarines and, people, very industrial footprint. But we have lots of fun things going on. I walk around Maker Faire and I look at the reactions of kids a lot of what they're seeing and what they're doing. And it's really the interactions between people and the things that makers bring that I think it's the heart of Maker Faire. I wanted to show just a 30 seconds of this video, and this is a Michael Brady robot, but it's just the kids trying to figure out what this robot is. There's no sound. I'm just showing. And just watch for a second. The kids trying to figure out what this is. So anyway, one of the things I've always said about making is that we see ourselves in the things we make and in the things that other people make. And no better example than a humanoid robot, I suppose. But it's true of lots of things. And this is Quentin Thomas Oliver, who's a musician. He's created this sort of electronic drum thing called Pony Trap. And I show it to you because it's kind of what interests me a lot about making is what is this? Is this art? Is it science and engineering? Is it, it doesn't fit into traditional categories. It's certainly music. And someone who's created an instrument to play with and playing a traditional instrument to accompany it. So beautiful performance and really interesting things. But Maker Faire for me is seeing, parents have an opportunity to make stuff with their kids. Um, and out of this grows a lot of the educational ideas for me. It was just seeing the kids like this. We didn't have to force them to do this. And parents discovered that their kids like doing this. And this is, I always said at Maker Faire, especially when we were doing it in San Mateo, we had a learn to solder tent. And on a Sunday morning at 10:15, we'd have 75 people in line who got up and said the first thing they want to do on a Sunday morning is solder. I think that's pretty amazing. And there's something kind of crazy about that. And this is, I put this in because Joan and Rich will be on later, but this is their table at Maker Faire. And, just how hands-on everything is to touch stuff. These are shapes that go along with their books, make geometry, make calculus, make trigonometry. We're really proud of the pioneering work they're doing of taking, making into traditional subjects in the curriculum, particularly math, and figuring out new ways to teach. But out of Maker Faire, really, I had two stories quickly. One is, you know, I would watch those kids and I got the sense of talking to them. They go like, how do I become a maker? How do I become one of the people that makes robots or, does all these things? And I initially looked at school and I said, we don't have a lot of that in school. How do we get there? And and then, we had started some work on a DARPA grant to create a makerspace playbook, and the second edition is on the Maker Ed site. And Maker Ed grew out of Maker Faire to try to, figure out ways to train more teachers to, in a sense, to make them comfortable teaching making in school. But I always had a lot of teachers coming to Maker Faire. And I started putting out a survey to them. I said, like, what are you coming for? And most of them said, I am looking for projects, creative projects to do with my kids who are bored in school. Like, I, in a sense, want to rescue them and give them a new kind of opportunity. And I always thought that there's a picture there because I wrote a thing in December on saving the school makerspace, and I'll get into that in a minute. But I thought of it, we didn't have any national plan. Well, we had a little bit of pat on the back from the Obama administration back then, but mostly this was a grassroots effort where people decided to do something. And I thought, the thing I wanted to make sure that they understood they could build a makerspace of any size and scale, that had more to do with the kind of practices that you engage, a little bit like Montessori, if you think about it. How do you engage kids and how do they get a chance to do things and create things? But I will say it's kind of sad. I think since COVID had a major impact on school systems. It had a major impact on closing maker spaces. And some of our key people moved on, either retiring or going into, other jobs. And so I've been worried that maker spaces are now questioned. It's amazing that we got so many of them out there, but it's also a little bit sad that some are in mothballs, some, amount to kids getting 20 minutes a week an activity. That's just not very much. And so that's kind of my focus of this talk. But I do believe that school maker spaces matter. I think, in one hand, some schools have become an entire makerspace, and that's great. Some makerspaces are a cart, so I don't care really the instantiation of it. But giving kids the opportunity to learn from experience, to use tools, to create things. I mean, drawing is making, there's lots of ways to do it. But I thought the makerspace signaled that school could be physically a different kind of space, that it didn't have to be a classroom with chairs in rows and a teacher at front. It could look like a place where you get to do work. And I always hope that the question students had walking into a school makerspace was, hey, what do I get to do here? So, I kind of, as we started thinking about this in education, talked about it as a tool set and a skill set, but mostly a mindset. Like um, you can talk about 3D printers, laser cutters. You could talk about prototyping, all these things. But what I saw in makers that I valued was how they learned, you know, and and that they were engaged, active, driving their learning. They realized they could learn almost in a variety of ways, especially using resources like YouTube and other things. Um, but they really, as I say here, they believe in their own individual agency to act and to create change in their own lives and their community. So how do you develop a mindset? Um, it's a good question. I don't think you teach it. I don't think you put a slide on a screen and say this is what a mindset is, model it. I think you see it in others, and that implies teachers as well as students, and you begin to see it in yourself. And it helps if those other people begin to recognize it in you. Think about like a young person trying to play a musical instrument. When does someone say to them, "Hey, you're a pretty good musician"? You know, I mean, and it means something. That's kind of what I think about with Maker. That people see you doing stuff and they begin to tag you that way and identify you. But making, I think, requires again time to practice. Just like a sport, we would not expect a sports team to succeed if they only practice 20 minutes a week. So getting more time has been kind of my thought, especially lately, about how we do that. And then I think community. We are so lucky, I believe, to have whatever you want to call this, but there's lots of people that identify this way that want to share, want to participate, and they share as learners, they share as teachers, and they share their work. So I have been working on a new project that is a local school, public high school in where I live in Sonoma County, California. And it just got a name last week, and it was the name I wanted, but I wasn't sure if I'd get that through. It's the Academy of Innovative Arts. And I'm trying to build something. I won't go into a lot of detail here, but we have a large traditional comprehensive high school. I wanted to build an alternative to that. Um, Increasingly, kids don't want to go to that large school. They want to do other things. And I'm trying to see if we can build this around a makerspace. We just started building it over from Thanksgiving to Christmas, and there it is. Doesn't have people in it yet. That's why it looks a little empty. But we have started to put that together. But it may be, innovative arts in my head was kind of, I was thinking about industrial arts. And when in the pretty post-World War II era, this is a manual from Iowa in 1948, industrial arts was a big push. It was something that, certainly part of vocational education, but it was pretty important and it's had its day. But I found this in that book. It said to provide an opportunity for students to develop desirable interests, attitudes, habits, and character traits through participation in cooperative work. And I thought, that's a lot what we talk about in mindset in as well. There were kind of five industrial arts: woodworking, masonry, upholstery, metallurgy, glassmaking. There are kind of different names for things depending on what teachers were there. Today we might call it more ceramics than masonry, and we might call, textiles upholstery, sewing and embroidery. But that was kind of the post-World War II era of industrial arts. And I think in many ways it ended about the time computers start being important. The digital era didn't relate very closely to this industrial program. We still had some things like industrial design carry forward, but in some ways we replaced shop class with computer labs. And after a while, when computers went one-on-one, it stopped making sense to have computer labs. Kids already had them. So what were you, and in dropping those both, we kind of lost hands-on learning. Everything was going to be done on a computer. Ed tech was going to be triumphant, and we were just going to Khan Academy kids and go from there. But I think innovative arts could really be a +5 to industrial arts. We still have woodworking and ceramics and textiles and many other things. I just came up with five here. There's things like genetic engineering and stuff that I think are DIY bio that are cool. But I was just trying to think, digital fabrication, electronics, computation, robotics, digital media and communications. These are all things that involve hardware, software, and increasingly AI. And I think it's important to incorporate AI into the tool set that kids have access to. And so, I suggest some of the applications. I think there's also, alliances to disciplines or fields and concepts as well. You could kind of extend this out from here. But that's kind of a framework that I'm just really put together for this presentation, but trying to think about what do we teach and how does it all relate to each other. Robotics is a great example because the new AI stuff is really kind of giving robotics brains and ways of training robots to do new things, these simulations. And I was meeting with a group in Silicon Valley a K-scale robotics, this open source robotics that instead of programming how a robot walks, they give AI that problem and it tries like a billion ways to get it to walk and keeps, refining until it finds good ways to do that. So, and I think also digital media and communications are really core parts of this today. I'm not going to go into it today, but I'm going to just put out a statement that I think liberal arts are really important too, the humanities, and I think math. Joan Rich will be talking about that, but how can we integrate that better? So what kids don't see today is why stuff is relevant to them. And when you just say, well, you got to take it to go to college, it doesn't register the way it used to. The requirements, the enforcement of that doesn't have the same meaning. So one of the things that I think we need to solve for, and this is a chart from that book, what does a 3 or 4 year program look like for kids? What is the progression they have in it? How do they get to do more things, acquire more skills, develop more complex projects? And I think projects are the key, that they should be doing projects from, the moment they're in there, and I think but I think more can be expected of them, and I think they over time begin to specialize in areas of interest. But I just throw this pyramid out for you to. That's something I think is a question I haven't seen a lot of work in the maker area on that. That's why I mentioned this book, Skill Seeker, by Steph Piper, who's an Australian, who started an open source project. And I didn't put the GitHub link in there, but all these things are downloadable, but also in a book. And she's begun defining skill sets and working with the community to do that. They're kind of badges, kind of game-like, but I'm showing you kind of a skill trees that she has. And if you pop into electronics, you would see other skill trees and so on until you get down to specific skills. But I think she did a really great service, was that she doesn't tell you how to acquire the skills and we may do that eventually, but right now it's like these are skills. And she imagined being used in a school or makerspace where kids could or makerspace members could identify their skill set and share, like if you know how to do that, could you show me how to do that? So she has there on the cover, track skills with friends and family. So I think I think of this as a practice, just as music is a practice, design is a practice. To become an innovator and create change, you have to look at the world differently. And that's, I think, has to do with part of that mindset. But you also have to have this agency to take your own ideas seriously enough to act on them. And I think that's who a maker is and what a maker does. So I published this book in 2016, if you want more background on this, but you probably understand most of it already. I will just say in closing that I really feel like there's never been a greater need in education for what all of us do. At the same time, there may be less receptivity to it. And I see Matt, who's also written a book for us on here, Matt Ziegler. But there are wonderful private schools out there. Dawson in Colorado is another, and the challenge getting attention in public schools is really hard. And that's one of the reasons I've been working on this Academy of Innovative Arts is, can we create models? And there are other models out there. I was talking to a woman, Julia Bamba from Gibbs, who was the founding principal of Gibson Eck, which is in Issaquah, Washington, outside of Seattle. And not only did we have a nice talk about how she started her school and what they do around a makerspace, with kids spending 2 hours a day in the makerspace and then having a design lab where they have a group project. But she also sent me a copy to an issue of the Make magazine, which she credited for helping her start her makerspace. So thank you. So it all comes around somehow. Thank you.